Thank you so much, Jonas, and thank you, Trebor, thank you, Christina, and thank you, everybody, for being here, and everybody whose collective labor produced this event. It's very exciting to be here and to take a moment out of the very busy day-to-day of the Drivers Cooperative. It is very much a work in progress, and so what I'm going to share with you today will be largely descriptive of how we came to be where we are and why. I'll be talking about the evolution of the co-op, and also I'll start here with a few words about my own journey. I think there's a way for me to click next slide. Is there? Oh, that, okay. Yes. This technology once again creating problems as it usually does. They say it's all about solutions, but from what I can tell, it's mostly creates problems in the world. Anyway, techno-optimism. We're not going to go into that debate today. So what you see here is one of the launch event of Co-op Ride, which is a rideshare platform launched by the Drivers Cooperative. I'm one of the many little people in this picture, and so I want to begin by thanking a few of I would literally need to thank thousands of people if I was going to thank everybody who made this possible, many of whom are actually in this room because we very much grew out of this movement. Our core group actually went to the Platform Cooperativism Conference in 2019 in New York City, and were inspired there. So that's one of the things that helped us land where we are. But I in particular want to thank my co-founders Alyssa Orlando, Ken Lewis, Mohammed Hassan, and Steve Slay, David Alexis, and Hank Turan, who couldn't be here in person, but maybe watching online. This has been a work of cooperation through and through. So what you see here is the May 1st, 2021, which is not that long ago, we began distributing shares to our members in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, in Queens, and New York City. Let me tell you a little bit about how we got there, and I'll begin with my own journey and how I ended up getting involved in far too many cooperatives. So this is me 13 years ago. About 13 years ago, I got involved in the labor movement, and I got involved for reasons that actually have to do with the city of Berlin. I was an exchange student here when the Iraq War started, and when 9/11, or shortly before the Iraq War started, when 9/11 happened. And it was in this city that I, as an American teenager who had grown up in the suburbs in the ahistorical reality of neoliberal capitalism of the late 90s, learned that other worlds could exist. This is a city that has transitioned from liberal capitalism to fascism to socialism, back to liberal capitalism, maybe back to, and continues to evolve. It's a place where the full range of, well, not the full range, but where a large part of the range of human political systems are on display. So when the Iraq War started, many of us here were probably part of that moment. We had the largest protest in human history on February 15th, 2003, and it wasn't enough to stop the war. So I started asking myself, well, first of all, what would stop the war? And I read some books, and a lot of people like Noam Chomsky said, well, or a lot of people like Noam Chomsky or like Karl Marx said, well, what could stop wars is workers stopping work. I said, oh, that would have been great if we could have done that. And then I also asked myself, why do wars happen? And a lot of the analyses came up with similar explanations, that it's because of our economic system, which is based on imperialism and plunder of resources and control of markets. So I started thinking about what we could do to change those things. And a lot of people said, well, you need to organize at the point of production. So I said, okay. And I joined the Industrial Workers of the World, a radical labor union, which believes in building a cooperative commonwealth. And I began working at a Starbucks in the Mall of America. And 2 years later, I was fired for doing exactly that, trying to organize a union. I got my job back and worked there for another 4 years. I spent about 6 years trying to unionize the fast food industry with the IWW. And I don't regret that at all, and I think that these struggles are ongoing. Workers in Buffalo, New York are trying to unionize Starbucks while we speak. These are important struggles, and it's absolutely crucial that people continue waging and supporting these struggles in the workplace. But after 6 years of this, I kind of had to reflect a little bit. I realized that while we made some gains, a few more cents an hour here and there, more respect in the job, a sense of empowerment, sometimes more stable schedules, we were a long way from the cooperative commonwealth. So I started thinking about alternative pathways, and I also reflected on some of the things that I'd heard from my coworkers when I'd talked with my coworkers about organizing unions. Very few people, when they imagine how to get a better life, say, For very few workers would I ever hear the first words on the tip of their tongue when I asked them, what would you like to do differently here? What would you like to see change? It was rarely start a union. As a union organizer, your task is to open that up as a possibility and make people think that it is possible to collectively have power at work. But it didn't come very naturally for people. What I did hear was a constant and soft refrain of, I want to start my own restaurant. And at the time, I kind of dismissed that as being petty bourgeois, and the Marxist arrogance of a labor organizer in their early 20s. But when I really thought about that, it sat with me. People want to own, maybe instead of being less radical, maybe that's actually more radical. People don't just want to bargain with an employer, they actually want to have full democratic control over their workplace. Now, of course, people were thinking of that kind of individually in a lot of cases. So, I also realized, as I learned more about how these businesses work, that the people who start businesses are not the kind of Ayn Randian great geniuses that they make themselves out to be, right? Like, everyone in this room is exactly as competent and able to start and run a business as the people who end up doing those things. What they have is access to capital and often a certain arrogance that they believe that they are preordained to be the masters of the universe, right? So that stuck with me. I did a lot of other things, traveled around, moved to China for a while, was involved in other labor organizing things. Years later, I ended up in New York City, and I started working as the education director of a labor NGO organizing Uber and Lyft drivers. And here, again, the first thing I heard from workers was rarely, we want a union, although workers certainly do want to organize unions. It was often, we want to own the platform. Why don't we create our own app? So I got some resources. I started a class exploring worker ownership and how that could transform these numbers that you see up here. Uber and Lyft are extracting about $1.5 billion every year from the 91% immigrant workforce of for-hire vehicle drivers in New York City. They're also deactivating drivers, which means firing drivers along patterns that evidence racial bias. And they're externalizing all the costs of doing business onto drivers, which pushes drivers into poverty. So for a sense of what those numbers look like, you can see the math on the screen here. So workers want to own the platform. So I decided to get and workers have been organizing and fighting against this, but for every step forward with regulations, often they're pushed 2 steps back. So I decided to see what I could do to help drivers start their own platform. After the class ended at my place of employment, starting a competitor to Uber was outside the scope of my job, so I began spending nights and weekends working with a group of drivers to launch a driver-owned platform. That work was really able to accelerate during the pandemic. Ironically, as capitalism slowed down, I think we can all remember when the world's heads of state and heads of cities were resistant to slowing down capitalism in order to save lives. Tens of thousands of people in New York City died because our elected leaders were too irresponsible and too accountable to the financial captains of our country to take the simple step of even closing the schools. Let's never forget that, right? So during that time, drivers were off the road. There was a struggle for drivers to even get unemployment benefits, but once they were able to, suddenly there was time and space for workers who usually are working 60 hours a week behind the wheel to think, to meet on Zoom, to talk and to plan. So what we came up with was that this idea to build a driver-owned platform with the goal of replacing all the negative things you see here that drivers experience with Uber and Lyft with a much better daily reality. The goal is to help drivers transform their own daily lives through worker ownership, and that is what's happening. So it might seem very unrealistic for workers to do this. What I realized, and I know I'm running out of time here, what I realized is that to start a platform, we needed basically 5 things. You needed drivers. Well, obviously, we had a lot of drivers because our group was made up of drivers. You need riders. Usually, the corporate platforms pay for marketing in order to get riders. We realized we could tap into sort of the social movement networks we were part of to spread the word, to get riders. You need technology, which is no small thing and continues to be a struggle that we're dealing with, but we do have technology. You need a team that knows how to manage those things and put them together to run a business, and you need capital. So most companies start with that thing, with capital, and use it to buy everything else. We started with labor, and we had to somehow assemble the other resources. what I realized in this process is that entrepreneurship, I think people think of as, this is not the same as normal entrepreneurship, obviously. Normal entrepreneurship, you go to a venture capitalist, and ultimately where you're selling them is the vision that you're going to build a company which will be valued very highly because it's able to extract a lot of value from workers, and that's what will mean that you're able to sell out your shares in successive rounds of investment. We took a very different approach, which I think is a nice word in French, bricolage, right? Which is where you assemble things together. There's a great word in German, zusammenbasteln. Wir haben diese Firma wirklich zusammengebastelt eigentlich. But my favorite word of all to describe this process is from English, which is MacGyver. We MacGyvered this thing together. We got drivers from our labor organizing networks. We have riders from our social movement networks. Technology we actually bought and then customized at one point. And capital, we were very lucky to get the support of the early support of that's our team, from the cooperative movement. We crowdfunded, we got a loan from Shared Capital Cooperative, which allowed us to get started. That helped us launch. After we had launched, people were like, oh, this is actually a thing. Suddenly it became possible to raise money through regulation crowdfunding. We raised $1.4 million, which we're now using to build the company to the next level. This is a meeting of our members with our securities lawyer where we're discussing using this pathway, which allows workers to retain 100% ownership. So that's what brought us to where we are now. And I think I'll wrap up here. I could talk about where we're going next, participatory design of technology, continuing to use labor organizing strategies to expand and build our organization. But maybe where I'll end is if you're in New York City, please download Co-op Ride. You can go to our website, drivers.coop, or go to the App Store or Android Store and take a trip with our members. It's the only service in New York which allows you to hail somebody who you can talk about co-ops with at the click of a button.
Hello. Okay, so let's talk about Circus. I tried to explain it, you won't understand, but it's okay. Circus is a community-based, complementary currency. In other words, it's a cryptocurrency because it's on the blockchain. It's on the XDAI, that's a side chain of the Ethereum, which means we don't use so much electricity like Bitcoin. I like to say it because some people are concerned about that. And by Circus, we say that we give each other basic income. With Circus, can communities give each other basic income? And it sounds like marketing bullshit, but no, with Circus, it's indeed a matter of fact. I will explain that a bit later. If you set up a such kind of basic income system where basically everybody can come and say, hi, I would like to use it. You will need at some points a big witchcraft. One is how can you avoid that Sybil attack happens? People just flood in with fake accounts. They take for their fake accounts these, for us, very valuable tokens. And that harms the system. And one of the most important things with Circus is that we found a solution for that problem without building up a central authority which wants to scan your eye or which gathers your ID or something like that. Our solution for is a decentralized trust system, which means you're welcome to set up a lot of fake accounts. We don't mind it because the way how you can use Circus is spending these tokens through your trust connections. which means we tell everybody that the system is built in a way that there are some channels in the system. These are the trust connections, and you should trust only people who you know that they are real people, real persons. And these bottlenecks protect the system, that if you set up a lot of fake accounts and you get that this fake basic income, the system will be protected through this trust system. It's much more complicated and it's indeed clumsy. That's one of the problems, that if you have euros, you know that you can spend basically everywhere. If you have our basic income, this complementary currency, you most likely won't be able to use everywhere where circles accepted, just the ones who are trust you, because this is the way how we want to protect the system. And that is one of the reasons why we say it's indeed a community-based basic income. The other is that if nobody is giving value for this complementary currency, this will be just empty tokens, and nobody will be interested with very good reasons in circles. So, and that will be our job. We want to build up a community economical circles. In German, it's a Wirtschaftskreis. I think that's better. Where we find businesses who are willing to give valuable services, good, instead of euros, for circles. And if we have it, then this basic income has a value and it won't be only a useless token. A bit more to that. My cooperative, let's see, can I? That's not so interesting. That's the wallet. Here you can see I have so much circles. With circles you can get daily 8 tokens. That's your basic income, and I sold my bike and some things like that, and that's why I have more. It's amazing fun. And that's my cooperative, Circus Cooperative. This scope has 2 big goals. One is that we want to build up in Berlin a flagship pilot, because if you have such a great, big and complicated ideas, you need to prove that it works. So in Berlin, we want to build up that system. And we want to gather here useful experiences. We are a very good network with the different research teams. And we want to distribute this knowledge to other hubs around the world who want to build up a similar system. They are, actually. The most promising one is now in Bali, in Indonesia. They have money, they have knowledge, and they did a very good research. What people need there, and that's a very interesting and promising difference compared to Berlin, because what we are doing here is rather a basic pocket money in a very clumsy system. So now when we are setting up everything, we have people who have enough motivation because they are looking for some common good in the crypto world. There is not much, but we are. Or they are basic income enthusiastic, or I don't know. But putting so much learning effort to this system, which is unfortunately now a lot, for a basic pocket money is for a very limited amount of people interesting. If they do it in Indonesia, this idea, what we are testing, can help a lot of people a lot. And that's a big difference. And our cooperative, Circus Cooperative, is supporting with knowledge other smaller hubs around the world. There is interest from Indonesia, other parts, Vietnam, Vancouver, Africa, many parts of Europe as well, who want to try it. And this group is the Circus Cooperative, is helping them with knowledge. A bit, as you can see, it's mostly, no, not anymore. I'm sorry. It's a mostly female group. This is what I wanted to tell, but hopefully you saw it. That's one of our lessons learned from the past. This idea is about 6 years old, and 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we had a nice collapse because people were too much busy about intellectual competition and things like that. And that was one of the reasons why we decided to build a cooperative, because it's a much more democratic approach. And we want to distribute this idea. We want to give influence to other people who want to test it and try it. And that was the reason why we went for a solution for the cooperative. I need to talk about what happened to us with the pandemic. We had the launch around 1 year ago, and actually that time we planned a very soft launch. We wanted to test it in Berlin with the 200-300 people and then see if it works, and then go to the big wide world that guys, we have an idea and it seems like working. And partly because of the pandemic, it turned out that our launch became viral. And instead having 200 users in the next 2 weeks, we had 180,000 users. And this flood just destroyed the system and destroyed the dream. Most of these people had completely unrealistic expectation, like they will have a free Bitcoin, which was really not our offer. Actually, this kind of money is really not meant for investing. But I mention it because times of crisis are usually very good, so to say, for complementary currencies and for other economical approaches. And this scary interest was, I think, a very important evidence for that. It showed that the world is kind of waiting us, even if they're not understanding what we are doing. There is definitely a huge need for basic income, which is independent from the state. Our one is independent from the state. There is definitely interest for complementary currencies which give an additional support for your economical situation in times of crisis where you might have no euro values. And that was a very interesting experience. About our future hopes is that now we are working on the Berlin level. For example, we have a tax advisor, bookkeeper who accepts circles. I'm telling you that because it's a very good example. If you have in the system such kind of service, everybody can accept circles as a payment because that kind of service is useful for everybody. And with such points, you can build up an economical circles. Then if the yoga teacher, the interpreter, the vegetable shop, whatever, can pay instead of euros for that tax advisors with their circles income, then at least for this amount, they can accept it. And then your basic income has a value. And that's a very interesting game. Our hope is that it will work, and then the explanation won't be so needed, won't be such a big minefield, because if something works, people ask less questions, have more likely trust, and then we can offer a much more handy, smart package for communities who want to give each other basic income. That's it. I hope I had my time.